And then finally, a piece of advice for Goldman Sachs, courtesy of our friends over at SNL.
Just a tip, if you're trying to convince people that you care about things other than money, may I suggest removing the words gold and sack from your name?
All right, another bit of advice. Don't tell the taxpayers who've already handed trillions of dollars to support your corrupt financial system so that you can continue to pay yourself. Don't tell them you're doing God's work. Just take the money. It's fine. You're stealing the money, but don't tell us it's God's work. And that's what we're talking about next here on The Morning Meeting. The institution that has become the poster child for bank bailout rage, the chosen one last year by Hank Paulson, Wall Street Goliath, Goldman Sachs. In a rare interview, Lloyd Blankfein, the chairman and CEO, says, forget the negative press. Forget all the facts. Goldman Sachs is, quote, doing God's work. Here, Blankfein's rationalization, according to the UK's Times Online, he says, quote, we help companies to grow by helping them to raise capital. Companies that grow create wealth. This, in turn, allows people to have jobs that create more growth and more wealth. It's a virtuous cycle. We have a social purpose. Sounds like innovator investor capitalism. However, the truth is Goldman Sachs makes a minuscule percentage of their revenue actually helping anybody raise capital. Their massive profits come mainly from what's called proprietary trading, which, if you're not familiar with Wall Street terms, is most similar to betting on football games. In their case, they keep all the winnings using taxpayer money to place their bets, and we pay the multi-trillion-dollar losses. The more Goldman bets, the bigger the bonuses are, and the more you have to pay. They hide behind the language of capitalism in order to perpetrate the theft. And that's why, again, so the loopholes, all that. Anyway, they call it a virtuous cycle. I don't know what you call it when you lobby taxpayer money to continue to fund the casino for your enrichment and for everybody else's detriment. Blankfein, for his part, insists Goldman's success benefits everyone and that people should be celebrating the company's successes, not condemning it. But as Goldman continues to defend its actions, yet another big name in banking saying, I'm sorry. Actually stunning. In an interview with Bloomberg News, Citigroup co-founder John Reed apologizes for helping to build a company that has sapped taxpayers of trillions. He says banks that big need to be broken up into smaller parts. Reed also goes on to say it was wrong to repeal the 1999, it was wrong to pass Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which repealed Glass-Steagall, which required a separation between commercial banks and high-risk investment banks, a change that he, as CEO of Citicorp at the time, was instrumental in enacting. In other words, this is the man that helped create Citigroup, that repealed the law, and is now saying it was a mistake. Reed, just the latest to call for a change in the broken financial system. Former Fed Chairman Paul Volcker, having been pushed out apparently at the White House, continues to push for revamped versions of the legal changes that were pushed before. Ex-Goldman executive Gary Gensler also continues to push as chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. They had a small victory on Friday, getting some more supervision of financial derivatives, albeit still with an 80% exemption as the rule is currently written. In addition to those two men, George Soros out saying the bank bonuses are nothing more than hidden gifts from the state. I think most people in this country know they're not even that well hidden. The question we're asking is, why is it that Goldman Sachs quite simply doesn't get it? We're joined now by Nomi Prince, senior fellow at think tank Demos. She's also author of It Takes a Pillage. She's a former managing director at Goldman Sachs. Also with us, Jonathan Capehart. Nomi, welcome back.
Thanks, Dylan.
I feel like it's a classic example of the emperor naked in the middle of the room, not having clothing. Everybody can see that this is happening. Everybody can see that it is a massive bank theft perpetrated with taxpayer subsidies, and yet the CEO of Goldman Sachs over the weekend now claiming he's doing God's work.
Well, you know, first of all, when I was at Goldman, we didn't have prayer meetings before deals.
You did or did not?
The whole God's work thing is a little odd. And you know, I think they do understand the anger. I truly do not think they care. And so when you come in talking about this virtuous cycle and raising capital for other things to occur and to create jobs, first of all, as we know, jobs have been lost. And as we know, the only cheap capital that has been created is the capital that Goldman has received when it transformed itself into a bank holding company last September, and then very stealthily transformed itself into a financial holding company this August, which allows it to have gotten the cheap backing for their capital from the government, as well as other perks, as well as continue doing exactly what it does in terms of its risk-taking and its proprietary trading and its private equity deals to make the kind of profits that it's making.
Jonathan Capehart.
Yeah.
I used to, when I started this coverage going back a year ago, or a year and a half ago, however long it's been, my concern was people don't understand what's happening, and as a result, nothing will be done about it.
Right.
Now I sit here, and it's quite clear to me that honestly everybody understands what has happened and what is happening, or at least a version of it, and yet still nothing is done about it. Why is Washington, D.C. so tone-deaf to an electorate that knows that there's been these subsidies paid to the banks? They may even believe that it had to be done to save the system, but they also know nothing is being done after the fact other than to legalize too big to fail, to continue the exemptions. Why does Washington not get it?
Washington doesn't get it because the electorate, the angry electorate, which is, we know, it's angry, hasn't taken the extra step of burning up the phone lines on Capitol Hill. They made their anger known at the ballot box last Tuesday. But what they now have to do is to take those demonstrations and that anger. Remember when you had those folks on a couple weeks ago who were leading those bank protests in
the
Chicago?
American Bankers meeting. Yep.
Right. Those folks need to come to Washington and make the folks on Capitol Hill understand that they are angry, and while all this talk about derivatives and these things that, quite frankly, confuse me, and I'm certain it confuses, lots of people out there in the rest of the country, but they do know and agree with you, Dylan, that there's a major theft going on, and that they're the ones who are going to be left paying for the thievery, but they're not taking that anger and making folks in Washington understand it. And you have members of Congress coming on all the time saying, what we need is for the American people to call us, because that's what gets our attention. And so far, that hasn't happened.
Yeah, I want to go back to Goldman Sachs, Nomi, for a second here. Is the reason this hasn't happened in terms of any real legislative change is because of the leadership of the Lord at Goldman Sachs, as Lord Blankfein put it, and because they have the Lord behind them, they're able then to make sure that the laws are never changed to kill their magic money stealing machine, because they got the protection of God? Is it like a crusade?
Well, again, I think God probably doesn't even get it, and to some extent, Goldman, I think, thinks it's stronger than God, and it certainly had the presence throughout the bailout, throughout the subsidies. With Hank Paulson as Treasury Secretary last year, and now Tim Geithner, who is part of the entire creation and concoction of the theft that went on, is sitting there dodging questions, whether it's on Meet the Press or whether it's in front of congressional leaders, as to what this firm has done and everything else. And I agree with Jonathan. We as people need to get a lot angrier. We need to get a little of the Howard Beale sentiment from Network and be like, I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore. I mean, that is what we need.
The reality is the solution is quite simple, Nomi, and please correct me if I'm wrong. If you simply put everything in public and made it illegal to do some proprietary casino gambling with taxpayer money, a lot of the ability to steal will go away, no?
Well, exactly. There were no strings attached, not just to that little mini TARP fund, which $700 billion wasn't small, but was only a part of what ultimately was $17.5 trillion worth of gifts to Wall Street, a lot of which went through the Fed till this day, secretive loan facilities and everything else. So, yeah, if you opened everything up, which should be what the White House should want, which should be what the Treasury Secretary should do, and should be what Congress should demand. If we made that stuff public, people would know the extent of the theft, and we should have attach strings to any of this money, any of these gifts, and say, look, you know what? If you are getting money from us, from the taxpayer, from the federal government, you have an obligation not to use it to risky ventures and not to use it to pay these kinds of bonuses, but to use it, actually not even to take it, literally
to be fired and go away, I think is what your obligation is.
And say,
I think if this TV show fails, I don't think the government's going to give me any money. I think I'm just going to get fired and sent home.
You could try.
Yeah, we'll see.
You are doing a service, Dylan. You've got to keep on going with this because getting the truth out there is hugely important.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, again, I might be doing Satan's work if Goldman is doing God's work. A pleasure, you two. Who knows? Anyway, everybody's got their opinion, but the Lord apparently leads Goldman Sachs. Contessa, what's going on in the rest of the world?